Divas, is Florida in play for Democrats this year? Democratic National Committee Chairman Jaime Harrison thinks so, and he'll tell us why. And also joining us today is U.S. Rep. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She is one of my OGs. She's a former chair of the DNC, and she's been in Congress now for 20 years. She'll tell us why she thinks Florida is in play. There's a reproductive rights bus tour going on. It started in Palm Beach. We've got some Democratic leaders with us here today to talk to you about what Amendment 4 in Florida means, and also talk about some down ballot races, some races to watch in November. So, Democrats on the move in Florida. Stick with us. You don't want to miss it.
People are fed up. They're tired. They're tired of the doom and gloom from the Republican side. They know that America's better days aren't behind her. America's better days are ahead of her. That's what makes America great, is the future. That our future is always bright and the future is always better for the next generation.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Hello, Chairman Jaime Harrison. Thank you so much for joining Deeper Dive with me today.
Thank you for having me.
My neighbor is active in Democratic politics in Tallahassee, here where I live. And I told her I was doing the podcast with you, and I asked her what she would ask. And she said, tell them we need more yard signs. They can't keep enough yard signs in Tallahassee. So just FYI.
I'll pass that along to the state party chair.
Well, yeah, I could tell Nikki too. I just thought that was funny. You're in Florida this week on a bus tour. What brings you to the Sunshine State?
Well, we are kicking off the Harris-Walz Reproductive Freedom Tour right here in Florida. And because this state is an important place, it is a battleground where women are fighting for control over their own reproductive and health choices. We have seen an abortion ban in this state that restricts the freedom of women. And we wanted to come to the heart of where that fight is, right here in Florida. We're in the backyard of Donald Trump, in the backyard of Ron DeSantis, in the backyard of Rick Scott, to say that enough is enough, that we're not going back, that we're going to do all that we can to fight for the reproductive freedom for all women.
You know, we do have on the ballot Amendment 4. That's what you're maybe referring to. You're here to try to help drum up support for that amendment. Florida does have a higher threshold for passage for amendments. I know these have passed in a number of other Republican-led states. Florida, 60%. It's a very high threshold to pass a constitutional amendment. What are your thoughts on reaching that plateau?
I think we're going to do it. I think we'll do it because this is not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue or independent issue. This is an American issue, and across party, regardless of your party background, most people, the majority of Americans, and I think the majority of Floridians, the vast majority, believe that women should have the right to control their own bodies. Men have the right to control their own bodies, right? There's nothing restricting men for what they can do with their bodies. Why then should there be a different set of rules for women? Why should women then have to run to Ron DeSantis and to Rick Scott and to Donald Trump to ask permission about doing things with their own bodies? Why should they risk their lives? Because these men know better than them about their own bodies. That should not happen. It should not happen in America. It should not happen in Florida. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that this attack, full frontal attack on our freedoms, ends in this election.
You know, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of people have written about it. And I'm, one of them, lots of navel gazing about Florida, whether Florida is a deep red state, whether Florida will ever be a swing state again. Republicans now have a 1 million voter advantage over Democrats in the state. What do you say to people who ask you that question?
This is the thing. I've been asked this question about the voter registration advantage a lot. Well, Democrats had a 1 million voter registration advantage over Republicans, but Republicans still won the state. Why? because voter registration is important, but it doesn't matter in the end result. What matters is who turns out to vote. You got to have the mechanism. You got to make sure that you're educating the voters about the issue. You got to make sure you're turning out the vote so that people turn out, and that's the most important thing that happens. So the greatest poll that we will have is the one that takes place on November 5th. Can Democrats go across the state into all communities, urban and rural and suburban, and talk about the issues that are important and talk about why their fundamental freedoms are on the ballot and who's actually fighting to protect those freedoms? That is what this election's about, and that's what Democrats have to do. So I'm proud to say that, we have opened 12 offices, over 80 staff, and it's growing across the state of Florida. I'm told that almost 40,000 new volunteers have signed up since Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have became our nominees. The energy, the enthusiasm, the hope and joy and everything else, the momentum is on our side. Let's go tell that story. Let's talk to the voters. Let's get them riled up. Let's get them to the polls. And I believe on election night, we'll hear those three words that we heard years ago: Florida, Florida, Florida.
I heard you say that in your little Twitter clip. You said Florida, Florida, Florida. How do you translate that exuberance into action? You're here, you're doing the bus tour. It takes money to print yard signs. It takes money to spread your message.
This is why those offices are important. This is why those staff members are important. This is why volunteers are important, because you've got to have the infrastructure in order to accommodate this newfound energy that we have on our side. If you don't have the infrastructure to handle 40,000 volunteers, if you don't have the staffing and the capacity to do that, then that's wasted energy, right? That's wasted enthusiasm. And so we have been building this up over the course, supporting the Florida Democratic Party. Nikki Fried has done a wonderful job of rebuilding the Florida Democratic Party. There's still work to be done, but we are well on the path to see this party be what it has been in the past. And I applaud Nikki and Fentress, Driscoll over in the State House, Chevron, and so many others for not giving up, fighting and building and keeping hope alive in all of these communities and in the state. And so we have seen how Democrats have flipped some Republican seats. A few years ago, we had a Republican who was the mayor of Jacksonville. You don't now. We have first woman mayor who's a Democrat in Jacksonville. State House seats that we have flipped. Just recently, even some of the school boards, what are the right-wing moms for liberty?
Moms for Liberty.
Yeah. All these right-wingers and Ron DeSantis endorsed them, and they lost just recently because people are fed up. They're tired. They're tired of the doom and gloom from the Republican side. Republicans want to make you afraid of everything. They get to the point that they don't want you to even walk out your door because you're afraid of something, of the air or their neighbor or the roads or something. But people are tired of that. They're looking for hope. They know that America's better days aren't behind her. America's better days are ahead of her. That's what makes America great, is the future, that our future is always bright and the future is always better for the next generation. Democrats believe that to our core. We are a party of hope. They are the party of fear. And people are tired of being afraid. They're ready to have hope and joy and to see a bright future for their kids and their families.
President Obama won Florida, and a lot of people were surprised by that. Do you think that Vice President Harris will have the same kind of effect on Florida voters? Maybe not to win in Florida, but to close the gap? I mean, how important is it to maybe make that margin closer and not actually get those electoral college votes, but just to have a strong showing in Florida?
Well, I think it's important for people to remember Joe Biden lost Florida by three percentage points.
That's right. Yes.
Yes. So folks need to understand it was not a blowout. Donald Trump blowing out Joe Biden, 3 percentage points. That's a few 100,000 votes in some targeted areas. So that enthusiasm, that hope, that joy, that motivation, you bring those into the mix, and you got a wild card going on here in Florida.
You really think so?
The only two states that I've visited more than Florida in this last year are Pennsylvania andWisconsin. And I would say Illinois, because we had the convention there. I was
That's
there a
right.
lot.
Yeah.
But I really believe in Florida, and people have known it. I've been saying it. I'm not just hush hush, but guys, you want to take a look at Florida. I've been bold about this need for folks to take a look at what's going on in the state. Because I think if there's any state that is fed up with a Republican BS, and the fear and what Ron DeSantis is doing and the bullying, it's the folks in this state. And, you get to a point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, then you push to enact some changes, and you want to change the mix up. And I believe that Florida is primed for that at this point in time. The stars are aligning. This ballot measure is important. For the first time in 30 years, Democrats are running a candidate in every race for the state House, the state Senate, and in Congress. You got the right type of leadership that's hungry, that is willing to punch and to push back. And all of those things are, I think, the raw materials that you need in order to win. And now we got our MVP and Kamala Harris, and we got our coach in Tim Walz. We're ready to bring that championship back home here to Florida.
I know very little about sports, but I do recognize MVP and coach. So, do you think that having the amendment for the right to an abortion, to enshrine the right to an abortion in the Constitution, in the state Constitution, how much of an impact do you think that'll have on driving voter turnout?
I think it'll have a huge impact. We saw in red Kansas, we saw in Ohio, where the numbers were overwhelming in terms of people coming out to vote, because it's about our fundamental freedoms. It's not even about political parties. It's about our freedom. And, it's hard to get a freedom. For the first time in 50 years, women in this state don't have the freedom to control their own bodies. It's sad to think that their, grandmothers and great-grandmothers had more freedoms than now their granddaughters and their great-granddaughters. In America, we're supposed to be getting more freedoms, not less. And so, yes, freedoms are hard to come by, but you got to fight like hell to protect them and to keep them. And I think people, Democrats, Republicans, and independents are ready to fight like hell in order to secure their freedoms, not only for themselves, but for the next generation.
Do you run a risk in, the fact that you're doing this bus tour, you're participating in this bus tour for the Harris-Walz campaign, the reproductive rights freedom issue? I mean, that is a driving issue. It's a pillar of the campaign, not only in Florida, right? You're doing this in other states as well. What are you hearing from people when you're talking to them? People
are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you're hearing the chant at every one of our rallies: we're not going back. We're not going back. And you can see that on so many issues. I mean, just the attacks on diversity right now in this country. Mm-hmm. People are saying we are not going back. And that's part of my motivation. I was raised in South Carolina, raised by grandparents who couldn't always vote themselves. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. She picked cotton and cleaned houses. My grandfather had a 4th grade education. He paved roads. And they couldn't vote all of their lives. They were subjected to Jim Crow. Growing up in South Carolina, had to sit in the back of the bus, had to sit in different segments at the movies and all. And I'd be damned if I let my 2 boys that I'm raising right now in South Carolina grow up in a state like that. We're not going back. We're not going back to those type of times. We're not going to allow people to restrict freedoms that were won with blood, sweat, and tears. We're just not doing that. Women won the right to control their own bodies. They should have that right. Men have it. Why can't they? We all won the right so that every person in this country, if you're an American citizen, should have the right to vote, unencumbered. We're not going back to all of the tricks that people did in order to keep people from going to the ballot box. And so, when we see these Republicans trying to do it, they're trying to restrict our history. Teach the history that they want you to teach. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, it's un-American. It's not who we are. We are progressing as a nation, not regressing. And the Republican parties are pulling us back.
I saw in the press release announcing your bus tour, you're talking about Project 2025. In a lot of ways, I will confess I haven't read the whole 900-page release or whatever it is, a volume, but it feels like living and covering politics in Florida, that Florida is kind of a model ground or a testing ground for a lot of what's in Project 2025. Can you talk about that?
That's exactly right. I mean, just again, the erosion of the safety net for the most vulnerable Americans, erosion of freedoms. They're pushing for a national abortion ban. They want to get rid of some of the protections, for folks, destroy the Department of Education. So those of us who have kids with disabilities lose some of the protections there. They want to make it harder on voting and all these things. This is not who we are as a nation.
The elimination of DEI, the elimination of diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that...
How in the world does diversity become a dirty word in a country of immigrants? Like, diversity is not something that we should strive for. But if you look at the playbook for the Republican Party, that's the case. I mean, what makes America great is its diversity. That's the strength that we have as a nation. Unlike any other nation, we're the most diverse nation on this planet. And that diversity gives us great strength. Yes, diversity can be complicated. It can be complex, right? But when we are all rolling in the same direction, there's nobody that can beat us. Nobody. And it's sad to see that the Republican Party, they're so myopic. That they are only focused on this select few instead of looking at how we can make this country, the American dream, available to all of America's people.
You announced you're steering money to the DCCC, to the DSCC, and to the DLCC. Are there any races in Florida that you all are going to get involved in or put money into?
All of those committees control state house races, and congressional races, and Senate races. And one of the things that I'm very, very interested in is, I believe, this map, the Senate map, is the most difficult for Democrats this cycle. We got a lot more places to be on the defense than on the offense. But I believe Florida is a place that we can be on the offense. And Debbie Mascarell-Powell, I believe, is a great candidate. And we need to make sure that we give her a fighting chance to go against Rick Scott. Just think about this. Florida deserves so much better. This guy probably committed the largest fraud of Medicare of the United States. And he's your United States Senator. Come on, Florida, we can do better than that. And we will do better than that. And Debbie provides that type of leadership. She will be a breath of fresh air to send to the United States Senate. Rick Scott, who is on every side of every issue, he's trying to now say supports IVF when he really didn't, because he voted against it in the United States Senate just recently. Florida deserves so much better, and they can get better in this election cycle. And so I'm going to do everything within my power to help Debbie run this race and win.
National Committee Chairman Jaime Harrison, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Take care now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, welcome back to Deeper Dive with me. And you are also a former chair of the Democratic National Committee. So that's why we've got you here today. You're on the bus tour. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me there. Great to be with you.
Sorry, we've got a frequent guest of the show. Max is making himself known in the background, so I apologize for that.
Max is honking. Okay.
Yeah.
Honking approval.
He's excited to see you, to hear you too. So
Dara, I didn't expect honking wave noises when we would start in this interview. Just like out on the street corner.
There we go. We're trying to make you feel right at home. So you're on this tour with about Amendment it's partially about Amendment 4. It's about reproductive rights as I said, we spoke with Chair Harrison yesterday. Tell me a little bit, you started in Donald Trump's hometown, Palm Beach. So tell us why Florida matters on this issue.
Well, first, it's great to be with you again. And it was phenomenal to kick off the Harris-Walz Reproductive Freedom bus tour right in Donald Trump's backyard in Palm Beach County, Florida. And then continue on up, chugging up the state to Jacksonville. The first 2 stops of a 50-stop bus tour that focuses on making sure that we restore women's reproductive freedom and women's reproductive health care choices all across America, because Donald Trump is proud of the fact that he appointed the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. He brags about it. And he's also a damn liar whose word and nothing that comes out of his mouth you can trust. One day he's saying he cares more. He thinks there should be more than 6-week limitation on abortion rights. And the next day he comes out against an amendment to our state constitution in Florida that would do just that and restore those reproductive rights. So he can't be trusted. And we have to make sure that women and people who love us all across America understand that.
Well, you know Florida as well as or better than anyone. You've been in Congress. I looked it up. This is 20 years ago you were elected to Congress.
20 years.
Yeah. You also
finishing my 10th term.
You also served in the state legislature before that. So just to show everyone how old I am, I remember you from back then. That's when we first met. Right. You know, Florida does have a high bar. I asked Chair Harrison about this yesterday. It's 60% passage, 60% approval for passage. Is there a danger that if this abortion amendment doesn't pass, that it empowers Ron DeSantis and bolsters him on the national stage, where he can say he's the only Republican governor who has defeated one of these amendments?
Well, first of all, I think that Amendment 4, which is the constitutional amendment on our ballot that would restore the reproductive rights that were embedded in Florida's constitutional privacy rights for 35 years, I think it will pass. It'll pass because more than 1 million signatures, way more than were required, were gathered to get it on the ballot. 20% of those signatures were from Republican voters, and then countless no party affiliation voters as well. It is already polling well above 50%. And there's, a decent size percentage of folks that are undecided. And I think we'll win most of those and be able to get this over the finish line, because people do not in Florida want judges, politicians, and the government all up in our healthcare business. And the 6-week abortion ban in Florida, which is a near total ban, has endangered the lives of many women and threatened doctors and healthcare providers with arrests if they actually try to help women obtain an abortion after 6 weeks. It's an outlook.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, so I'm hoping that you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, that's better. Can we talk realistically about Florida being in play for the presidential election and also for the U.S. Senate election? What are your thoughts on that? And how, is it important to maybe be realistic for Democrats' expectations of just how far they can go in a state that it's true that Donald Trump lost here by one here. President Biden lost by 3 percentage points for you. But
very close.
In 8 years ago. So, but 4 years ago, excuse me. What do you think Florida's chances are in terms of being a deep red state, a purple state, swing state? Is it really in play?
Florida is absolutely in play. We are an expansion state, not a battleground. But what that means is that we have an opportunity, because of the explosive enthusiasm that has come on the scene since Kamala Harris became our party's nominee. 30,000, I think we're upwards of 40,000 volunteers have come forward to help get the word out, knock on doors, make phone calls, get folks signed up to vote by mail all across the state. The momentum is absolutely going our way. And we have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. I'm sorry.
The momentum, that's okay. The momentum is going our way. The crowds that have showed up for this bus tour have exceeded expectations. There is so much enthusiasm, and we have 30 electoral votes. If Kamala Harris wins Florida, the race is over. So we are taking nothing for granted. We have a well-organized, coordinated campaign. The Harris campaign has expanded the number of staff, put more resources into Florida, and we have the momentum behind us. And on top of that, Amendment 4 being on the ballot is going to create a lot of opportunity for people to vote a full reproductive freedom ticket, which is what we're encouraging people to do. So it's not enough just to vote for Amendment 4. We have to make sure that we guard against the MAGA extremists in the legislature who will do, it passes, everything they can to undermine the decision that Floridians will make to make sure that the government and politicians aren't able to make their healthcare decisions.
You talked about that enthusiasm, and I've talked about it with other people involved with what used to be the Biden campaign, just doing a temperature check. Is it real? Is it, is it a thing? Am I just like, what, because I'm in Tallahassee, it's a little different.
Right.
And so, you've been around, like I said, you've been in Congress 20 years. You were chair of the Democratic National Committee. Were you surprised? Democrats have been pretty. I don't have to give you the numbers. I don't have to give you the stats on where Dems stand in Florida and the state legislature and the congressional delegation, et cetera, et cetera. Were you surprised at the degree of at the reaction to Kamala Harris entering the race?
I was excited, thrilled, overjoyed, and it was so validating because all of this hype around, Florida supposedly turning red, the false narrative that the Republicans have developed, that they have 1 million more registered voters in Florida. They don't. What they did was that they have played games with voter registration numbers and with the ability for people to actually go to the polls and cast a vote, eliminating the permanent vote by mail ballot list so that it's harder for people who vote by mail to be able to actually sign up, because you have to sign up again every single election cycle. People should go to their supervisor of elections website in Florida, make sure they're signed up to vote by mail, because you never know if they're going to be in your precinct, able to vote in person on election day or during early vote. But this myth, this mythology that the Republicans have created that we are a red state is just that. We are purple, and that's why I wasn't surprised that people are excited about Kamala Harris. I'll just give you some proof points here. For example, a red state, which would typically lean much more towards being anti-choice and anti-reproductive freedom, wouldn't have 20% of the people who signed petitions to put the abortion rights constitutional amendment on the ballot be Republicans. We wouldn't have gotten more than 1 million signatures to get it on the ballot. In the primary, just a couple of weeks ago, this time we had more Democrats voting in primaries across the state without a top tier race in most places than Republicans did. And so that enthusiasm was demonstrable as a result, just with those two things. And we're seeing the kind of crowds showing up where before, quite honestly, things were a little bit lackluster. Now we have this explosive enthusiasm where the phone banks are staffing up, the turnout at rallies and the canvas launches, getting people out door to door has been significant.
Well, thank you for being frank about what.
Can I add one more thing, Jen?
Please do.
The other thing that I think it's important to note is that the Republicans keep touting that they supposedly have 1 million more registered voters.
Yes, this is a talking point.
It is just that, a talking point that is inaccurate. What the Republicans in Tallahassee did is they made voters who had not voted in the last two elections inactive. They put them on an inactive status, which doesn't take them off the voter rolls. It just doesn't show them as if they are registered. So the Republicans are using numbers based on the fact that they have hidden thousands and thousands of Democrats who are still registered, who just have not been voting in the last two elections. So we don't need to, on our side of the aisle, we don't need to play sleight of hand or play games. We focus on turnout and GOTV, and so the Republicans can say whatever they want and create whatever narrative they want. The reality is that our candidate, Kamala Harris, has a lot more enthusiasm behind her because she is pro-reproductive freedom, focused on kitchen table economic issues, bringing down prescription drug costs, protecting Social Security and Medicare in the state with the highest percentage of seniors in the whole country, versus Donald Trump, who wants to end Social Security and Medicare as we know it. Rick Scott, our U.S. Senator, who actually proposed ending Social Security and Medicare. And that contrast is going to be very clear, and it's going to show up in the polls on election day.
Well, thank you very much. I have one more question to ask you, if you have the time for it. And if you have time for more than that, I can ask a fun question. But what races in Florida are you following the closest? What do you think are the most competitive races? We've got one here, I think, in a state Senate seat that could be competitive here in Leon County.
Yes, and Dara Parks is the Democratic nominee in that race, and I think he has a really good chance to take that seat back. That seat has traditionally been a Democratic-held seat, and the Republican incumbent has been a MAGA extremist, and that's just not in step with the character
That's Corey
of that
Simon.
district. Right. He's also lying about Daryl Parks, which is really outrageous.
The ads are really, really bad. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're pretty intense.
I saw one just today that suggested that Daryl Parks is anti-Semitic, and as the first Jewish woman to represent Florida in the United States Congress, who's known Daryl Parks for decades, I can tell you he has fought side by side, as an African-American leader with the Jewish community, and focused on combating anti-Semitism and racism wherever it rears its head. And that ad is a bold-faced lie. So, but I'm excited about him. You should, because that ad is vile and false. Whitney Fox, who is the Democratic nominee in Pinellas County against Anna Paulina Luna.
Right. That's a congressional race.
Right, and she's about as MAGA extremist as they come. The incumbent is. She couldn't be more, in Donald Trump's gym shorts than anyone. And Whitney Fox has the endorsement of numerous members of our congressional delegation. She has been doing the kind of fundraising, grassroots fundraising that shows that she's got people in her district behind her. She won the primary handily. And for Pinellas County is a moderate community. There are Democrats that win there. We often win that county. The Democratic nominee for governor and president often win Pinellas.
Yeah,
and so I think
Pinellas is always interesting. Pinellas and Pasco, I always look at those first when I try to make a prediction on election night. My daughter lives in St. Pete, and I've seen it change. I've seen Pinellas change a lot. There's pockets, that are more conservative.
It's a swing.
It is a swing.
It's a pendulum.
It really is a true swing county. So that one will be really interesting to watch, because I believe that seat is all Pinellas County, right? It doesn't go into any other.
I think it's just Pinellas, right?
Yeah.
Right. And also, Anna Paulina Luna has had the most extreme right-wing voting record, but also she has zero credibility. She goes on TV and makes outrageous statements, and it is certainly, I think, not the representative that her constituents thought they were voting for. So we'll see what happens there. The other thing that's really important that I think we have a very good chance to achieve is breaking the Republican supermajority in the state house. I think there's enough opportunities for us to pick up state house seats, and especially with Amendment 4 on the ballot. and the very stark contrast between all of the Republican incumbents and the Democrats that are running against them. So I'm watching that pretty closely too.
Well, okay, we'll have to
And
get
of course, don't forget about Debbie McPherson-Powell, who I
was
think
just
has
going
a
to
good
ask you.
chance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Debbie McPherson-Powell, you can see in the polling, she is not even that well known as a former member of Congress, and she's still polling within the margin of error against Rick Scott, which is why he put $80 million of his own money into the race recently, because he's pushing the panic buttons.
Well, that's.
By the way, he also just had a video. He just had a public interview that he actually suggested that what Democrats are for when it comes to reproductive freedom is killing a 9-month-old baby, right, and crushing their head, and that we want to put babies after they're born in the corner and starve them to death. I mean, he is an extremist liar that has committed Medicare fraud and proposed ending Social Security and Medicare as we know it. This is the most extreme person who is the most unpopular senator in the United States Senate.
Well, let me ask you, and maybe this is a good question to close on instead of a fun one, because this is you're on this reproductive rights bus tour now. And, this is an argument that opponents of Amendment 4 have been making. The governor makes the same argument. The opponents make the argument that it is, that this would allow abortion up until the moment of birth. And how do you, what is the message that you can give to voters to tell them if that's true or not?
That is just completely untrue. The language of the amendment would allow abortion up to the point of viability. And also,
what does that mean for a regular person? You and I know
exactly, right. That is about 24 weeks. And that's exactly what before they passed the 6-week abortion ban in Florida, that is exactly what the law was in Florida, in our state constitution, that the privacy clause in the Florida Constitution protected, and that allows abortion up to about 23 or 24 weeks when a fetus can live outside the womb of the mother, without extraordinary measures being taken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And then, of course, there are extreme cases when a woman's health or life is in jeopardy. Very rare extreme cases when a woman's health or life is in jeopardy, and that was also the law before Ron DeSantis appointed an extremist state Supreme Court that overturned a 35-year precedent that protected women's reproductive health care in this state and yanked it away, just like Donald Trump did nationwide.
Are you finding people are confused about the language? I mean, do you think that messaging that they're doing, the opponents are doing, is that going? Are you being asked about it?
You are actually the first person that's asked me in a way that suggested there was confusion. I mean, all across the state when I've traveled, people are very clear. They know what was allowed in Florida prior to Ron DeSantis' Supreme Court yanking the right away and the legislature passing this 6-week near total abortion ban. And that is what they want to go back to, for women to be able to make their own reproductive health care choices. Look, IVF being banned is next. Birth control is right behind that. I mean, they're trying across the country. What Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and the MAGA extremists want to do is take away all of our reproductive health care choices. The state Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, that is the direction that they are going. And by the way, Rick Scott, who uses his own daughter's IVF experience to suggest that he is supportive of IVF, but then goes to the floor of the Senate a couple of days later and votes against guaranteeing women's access to IVF. So you can't believe a word that either he or Donald Trump say. You a stone person or a stone person. If someone votes against the bills that would do what they said they were for, then they're a liar.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, U.S. Congresswoman from, where are you? Is it Weston? Is it Weston?
Yeah, Weston. Yes,
Weston.
Broward County.
Yes, my aunt's still voting for you. My 80-something-year-old aunt. She's in your district.
Tell her thank you.
She always asks me about you. Thank you so much.
So nice.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have
My
you
pleasure.
back after the elections. We can do a wrap up.
Would love that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Trust
bye-bye.
women.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC. To tell us what you'd like to hear, what you've thought about the podcast so far, or even just to mention how awesome we are, we have a new email address and we'd love to hear from you.
That's right. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com. I know it's a mouthful, but it's podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com.